Reincarnated with the strongest system. Chapter 651, What virtue do you represent? William was abruptly awoken by a fluctuation inside the 51st floor. Chiffon was sleeping peacefully in his arms, unaware that someone had intruded into their domain without his permission. Right now, many people wanted to enter the 51st floor and have an audience with William. However, there was a one-year period before the floor of Asgard could be accessed by the general public. Once the floor was open for everyone, they could partake in William's trial in order to gain the right to ascend to the 52nd floor. Since that was the case, someone appearing inside his territory meant only one thing. They found a loophole that has allowed them to enter this domain, William thought as he lightly shook Chiffon. The little glutton sleepily opened her eyes and looked at William with a confused gaze. "Wake up," William said softly. "We have uninvited guests. I don't know if they are hostile or not." The sleep in Chiffon's eyes disappeared as she nodded her head in understanding. William and Chiffon dressed and headed outside the castle of Asgard. Ever since their guests had appeared, they hadn't moved from their location. This made William feel that whoever these people were, they didn't come to antagonize him. Out of nowhere, Gullinbursti and Chirur appeared beside Chiffon. The golden piglet was riding on top of the mace and squealed cutely to greet his master. Chiffon lightly patted its head before giving it a warning. "There are some people inside the floor of Asgard," Chiffon said. "Chirur, look after Bacon. Big Brother and I will handle this ourselves." "Understood," Chirur replied. "But, we will be nearby. If anything unexpected happens, I'll come to your aid right away." Chiffon nodded, and watched as the mace and the golden piglet flew a few hundred meters away from them. Soon, William and Chiffon arrived at the Bifrost Bridge. When the half-elf saw who their guests were, a complicated expression appeared on his face. Chiffon, on the other hand, raised her guard. Her instinct was telling her that the lady in front of her was very strong. "I didn't expect that I would meet you here," William said as he stopped 100 meters away from the beautiful elf who was looking back at him with a smile. "I, too, didn't expect that we would meet in this manner," the beautiful elf replied. "I apologize for coming unannounced. I came here in a hurry after I heard the news." William frowned. "News? What news?" The beautiful elf smiled because she had expected this answer from William. "The outside world already knows of your accomplishments in the Tower of Babylon. Not only did you clear the 51st floor, that had remained unconquered for 1,000 years, you also gained ownership of a few other floors as well. You may not know of it, but you are now officially a big celebrity in the world of Hestia. I will be more careful when leaving the tower if I were you." William didn't appear too surprised about this news because the little turtle, Oogway, gave him a visit and told him that he was now a very popular person. The half-elf just didn't know what the little turtle meant by that time, but after his guest's statement, he managed to connect the dots together. Chiffon, who was just standing beside William earlier, took a step forward and used her small body to stand in front of William. It was as if she was shielding him from the person in front of her, who held a power that was similar to hers. "Oh! I like this little girl." Chloe clapped her hands happily. "Looks like she specialized in hand-to-hand combat, this will be fun. Behave yourself." Claire grabbed hold of her twin's hand. "It is not our place to meddle in this discussion." William's gaze was focused on the beautiful elf in front of him. It had only been a while since he had seen the familiar face, and missed her terribly. Unfortunately, although they looked alike, he knew that the elf that was standing in front of him was not the one he knew and cared for. "Celeste, what brings you here?" William asked. His heart ached a bit because looking at his master's twin sister reminded him of the beautiful woman who had taken his first time, and left for the demonic continent to find her master. Celeste smiled. Her sister, Celine, had informed her that William already knew about her identity. Since that was the case, there was no need to make a long introduction for herself. "I came here because you have unknowingly become one of the successors of my profession," Celeste explained. I came here, as the progenitor of Familia Mancers, to teach you how to activate your powers. Before William could even reply, Chiffon took a fighting stance as she voiced out a question. What virtue do you represent? Chiffon asked. If you don't give me an honest answer, I will not let you get near Will. Since Chiffon could easily sense the presence of the 7 deadly sins, she could also sense their counterparts as well. I mean you no harm, Celeste replied. I'm not very comfortable in revealing my virtue to anyone. Tell me, or I will not allow you to do as you please with my husband. Husband? You. Celeste shifted her gaze to William and gave him a disapproving look. She already knew that William was her twin sister's first man, but her sister never mentioned that William was already married. Aside from the mission that was assigned to her, Celeste's motivation to come to the tower as soon as she could was due to her curiosity about her twin sister's chosen man. She wanted to see the person whom Celine had taken a gamble with, to try to break free from the prophecy that they had been fighting against all their lives. You're married? Celeste asked. Big sister didn't tell me anything about this. It's complicated, William replied as he placed his hand over Chiffon's shoulder. But, Chiffon is indeed my wife. We got married here on the 51st floor. Was it part of the reason for how you were able to conquer this floor? Yes. Interesting. Celeste eyed the pink-haired girl who had managed to marry her twin sister's disciple. I will ask for more details later. You'd better not hide anything. I will report this to my sister. Whatever kind of punishment she will give you later, you better accept it without any resistance. The corner of William's lips twitched because Celeste was acting like a mother-in-law who had found out that her son-in-law was cheating on her daughter. While this was happening, the 2 fairy-like creatures that looked exactly like Celeste were looking at William like he was some sort of scum. You still haven't answered my question, Chiffon insisted. What virtue do you represent? William pulled his feisty wife in his arms and patted her head. It's fine. She's not hostile to us. You can feel it too, right? Will, you don't understand, Chiffon replied. Each of the 7 sins carry a power that can break the laws of the world. Celeste is one of the 7 virtues, meaning, she also has that kind of power. If you deal with them in a casual manner, they might stab you in the back. A/N, not if Will stabs them in the back first. Kikik. Seeing that his wife wouldn't take no for an answer, William sighed and nodded his head. I'm sorry about this, but can you just tell us what virtue you represent? William asked. I am your sister's disciple. I swear on my name and hers that I will not tell a soul about it. Celeste knew that there was no other way to fix the issue because the pink-haired girl was adamant to know what her divinity was. Left with no choice, she decided to compromise and revealed the virtue she wielded. Allow me to formally introduce myself, Celeste gave a simple curtsy as she eyed William from where she stood. Aside from my given name, I also go by the name Castitas. Celeste smiled. I am the maiden that represents the virtue of chastity, Celeste dy Wisteria. It is my pleasure and honor to meet the son of the saintess of the world tree, and the hero of the elves, as well as the one and only disciple of my sister, Celine. I have long wanted to meet you, William von Ainsworth. I pray that our relationship will be a good one not only for your sake, but for my sister's as well. Chapter 652, Unexpected Guests in the Floor of Asgard. Chastity. William arched his eyebrow. So you are the counterpart of Sidonie. If you are referring to the maiden that represents the sin of lust, then yes, I am her counterpart. Celine eyed William with curiosity. Not only my sister, but he also has that little girl as his lover. Not to mention, he's also an acquaintance with the sin of lust. Having the 3 sins on his side makes him a very likely candidate to be the Prince of Darkness. The Silver Moon continent, as well as some of the factions that were aware of the prophecy, were keeping their eyes on possible candidates that matched the elven prophecy. Some of them wanted to control the prince, while others wanted to eliminate him. Right now, Celeste was in the faction that wanted to kill the Prince of Darkness, so the prophecy wouldn't come to pass. Her sister had used her body to test whether William was indeed the prince, but the result was negative. Celeste even used her divinity to sweep her twin's body, in order to look for the prophesied mark of ownership that the prince would bestow upon his rightful bride. Since she didn't see any mark on her sister, her suspicion about William being the prince had decreased, but it didn't disappear completely. If the half-elf even showed a small inkling that he was the one in the prophecy, Celeste wouldn't hesitate to kill him, even if her sister, Celine, would hate her forever. While William was pondering his next move, Chloe, the blonde little fairy that looked like Celeste, raised her little fist and made a demand. "We came here from far away to teach you, and you're just standing there like a fool. Are you a fool?" Chloe asked. "Aren't you at least going to serve us some tea? Some snacks? I like pancakes. Do you have pancakes?" The awkward atmosphere immediately disappeared due to Chloe's energetic demands. William patted Chiffon's head and asked her to stand down for the time being. Regardless of whether they came here to teach him or not, Celeste was his master's twin sister, so he had to at least be a good host and show her his hospitality. "Where are my manners?" William smiled at his three visitors. He then spread out his hands in a welcoming manner and proclaimed the name of his domain. "As the first visitors to my domain, I welcome you all to Asgard. Please, follow me." William held Chiffon's hand and walked towards the castle. Celeste looked at the rainbow bridge that was in front of her with great curiosity before taking a step forward. She had seen many amazing things during her childhood, but this was the first time she had seen this kind of scenery. The Bifrost Bridge was a wonder to behold. Even Chloe and Claire flew towards the ground and patted the bridge out of curiosity. "These bridges are made from laws of the domain," Claire muttered. She was the scholar, and her twin sister, Chloe, was the musclehead of their group. The little familiar was very curious about everything in the world that caught her interest. "Is this safe to cross?" Chloe inquired. However, she didn't wait for an answer. Using her little fist, she punched the bridge to test whether it was strong or not. "Ah!" Immediately, the place where she punched was destroyed and cracks spread at a rapid pace. Celeste, who was only a meter away from the destroyed portion of the Bifrost Bridge, pretended that nothing happened, and continued to walk forward. However, if one were to look closely, the pace of her walk had drastically increased, overtaking the cracks that were forming behind her. "What kind of low-budgeted construction is this?" Chloe raised her little fist in anger. "Whoever made this bridge skimped on the materials." Claire flew forward and caught up with Celeste. Right now, both her and Celeste pretended that they didn't know the little troublemaker that was slapping the rainbow bridge, due to her irritation. The corner of William's lips twitched when he saw the destruction that happened behind him. The Bifrost wasn't something that could be destroyed by a single punch. Even Loki had to work in sabotaging the bridge for years before he succeeded in splitting it in two. "That Chloe is dangerous," William thought. "Perhaps she has a skill similar to the rule breaker that I use. A skill that ignores the laws of the world and nullifies it in her presence." The portion that Chloe had hit earlier was starting to crumble, and the little familiar was still shouting crap like cheap materials or dumb domain builder. William sighed and waved his hand. The cracks that were spreading in the bridge stopped their advance and started fixing themselves. Even the destroyed portion of the bridge was once again repaired, making the little familiar, Chloe, laugh before once again hitting it with her little fist. It was as if she was playing a fun game. She wanted to know which would be faster: the bridge's recovery rate or the destruction that she was dealing it with. William finally reached the limit of his patience and gave Celeste a devilish smile. "Do you mind?" William asked. Celeste coughed lightly and called out to her familiar, who had gotten carried away in destroying the Bifrost Bridge like a little child that had found a fun toy to play with. Chloe reluctantly stopped her attacks as she obediently flew towards Celeste's direction. However, a few seconds later, a mischievous smile appeared on her face. Without warning, she punched the Bifrost Bridge once again and continued her assault while laughing like a little witch, all the way towards Celeste. Seeing that the bridge was starting to collapse, William, Chiffon, and Celeste ran as fast as they could so that the mad, little, familiar behind them would not accidentally kill them all due to her crazy stunts. Fortunately, the group managed to cross the bridge before it collapsed entirely. Chloe's mad laughter could be heard not far away, which made Celeste and Claire feel apologetic. "Please, control your pet," William said with a frown. "This domain is just newly built, make sure she doesn't raise it to the ground." Celeste lightly cleared her throat before correcting William. "She's not my pet. She is my familiar. Soon, you will have a familiar of your own, because I will mentor you in the way of the Familia Mancer." Claire flew in front of William and gave him an apologetic bow. "I will look after her and make sure she behaves for the duration of our stay. I apologize for her uncouth actions." William stared at the familiar with short, green hair with curls in the end, and grey eyes, that was filled with wisdom. She looked exactly like a little Celeste. Both Chloe and Claire looked really cute, but their personalities were miles apart. The half-elf didn't mind having the polite Claire inside his domain, but the trigger-happy Chloe concerned him very much. "Very well, I'll trust that you can handle your twin," William replied. "Let's enter the castle." "Thank you," Claire nodded and flew towards Celeste's right shoulder. Chloe had already landed on Celeste's left shoulder and had a satisfied look on her face. Just as they were about to enter the castle, a flying mace appeared carrying a golden piglet on its head. Chiffon reached out to hold Gull and Busty, and patted Sherrer's head before taking the lead to enter the castle. She really disliked that one of the 7 virtues had disturbed her 1-month honeymoon with William on the floor of Asgard. Even so, Chiffon was a sensible lady. William had already told her that Celeste was not their enemy, so the little glutton decided to not antagonize their guests for the duration of their stay. Chiffon only hoped that their guests were really guests, and not pests. However, due to Chloe's unexpected rampage, the pink-haired girl's first impression of Celeste and her familiars had dropped to the bottom. William had an idea about what Chiffon was thinking, but he was also very curious about the unique prestige class, Familia Mancer. He had seen how powerful Chloe was. If his familiars would be just as powerful as her, then he wouldn't mind learning how this job class worked. According to the system, William needed the assistance of the Familia Mancer's progenitor to unlock it. William didn't have to be a genius to know that Celeste was the progenitor of the Familia Mancer job class, since she had just told him that's who she was. According to the system's calculation, Celeste is the only Familia Mancer in the world of Hestia at this point in time. This was not the first time that he had seen a job class that required the permission of its progenitor in order to be unlocked. His incubus job class had been one of these. It required the user to get the permission of the goddess of lust before they could become an incubus or a succubi. This restriction was considered a special case, and not many job classes had this requirement. William was already looking forward to the newfound powers that he would be able to unleash once his new prestige class was unlocked. What he didn't know was that Celeste was also very interested in what kind of familiar William would be able to summon. The powers, shape, size, appearance, and personality of the familiars were highly dependent on their summoner. Maybe he will summon a dragon, Celeste thought. A phoenix is also a possibility. The beautiful elf followed William with a helpless smile on her face. Not only had William become her sister's one and only disciple, he also became the first Familia Mancer that she would guide under her wing. Celeste felt that this was too much of a coincidence, but even so, she was glad that the profession she had acquired finally had its first follower. Chapter 653, The Juggernaut of Hestia Academy Part 1. Okay, let me get this straight, you are the very first Familia Mancer in this world, correct? William asked the beautiful elf in front of him, who looked exactly like his master, Selene. Celeste nodded her head. Yes. I came here to teach you how to become one as well. William, Chiffon, Celeste, and her two familiars were currently in the dining room having breakfast. William lowered his head and pondered for a bit. I would like to learn how to become a Familia Mancer, but I won't become your disciple. Is that fine? The corner of Celeste's lips curled up into a smile as she eyed William with her beautiful blue eyes. Although she had an inkling why William refused to become her disciple, she still decided to ask to confirm her hunch. Is your reason for declining to become my disciple related to my sister? Celeste inquired. Her gaze never left William, as the latter stared back at her. Yes, William replied. The half-elf could feel a little pain in his chest because Celeste looked exactly like Celine. If not for the fact that the elf in front of him had long, light green hair and blue eyes, he would have definitely pulled her into his arms and kissed her passionately. Looking at Celeste made William remember his master, whom he had already marked as his lover. You're too greedy, Celeste stated before adding honey to the pancake on her plate. You wanted to become a Familia Mancer, and yet you don't want to become my disciple. Do you understand how unreasonable this demand is? Right beside Celeste, the two familiars were also busy eating pancakes. Not far from them, several elves wearing maid clothing stood straight, while taking turns to replenish the food and drinks on the dining table. Charmaine stood beside William and personally poured fruit juice into his glass. She was the half-elf's personal maid, and always performed her duty to the best of her abilities. Surprisingly, Celeste seemed indifferent to this setup. Although she, herself, was an elf, she didn't mind seeing the elves do these chores akin to servants. Can you just make me a Familia Mancer and leave me be? I'll just study the profession on my own. I'm starting to regret my decision to travel to the tower as fast as I could. Celeste sighed. If I only knew that you have this kind of attitude, I wouldn't have bothered coming here. Celeste could tell that William didn't like her. This was the first time that someone had treated her this way. In the Silver Moon continent, everyone would look at her with admiration. Even the royal family would greet her whenever she visited the palace. In Hestia Academy, all the boys would look at her with infatuation, and the girls with adoration. Even the kings and emperors in the central continent would give her invitations and marriage proposals due to her beauty and identity. However, on the floor of Asgard, a half-elf was treating her like a suspicious salesman who was peddling his wares on their front door. This feeling was very refreshing to her. Someone actually dared to turn her away? William didn't know that his constant rejection of Celeste only fanned her determination to make him the second Familia Mancer in the world of Hestia. Familia Mancers must have this kind of attitude, Celeste thought. Unaffected by beauty, fame, and fortune. I guess my sister was right in choosing this person. If James was there and heard Celeste's thoughts, he would probably laugh out loud due to how wrong her assumption was. William was unaffected by beauty? If he was unaffected by beauty, then he wouldn't have other thoughts of his beautiful master when they spent their time together when he was young. Unaffected by fame? Ha! What a joke! Although William might act low-key at times, and have a modest temperament when being praised, deep inside he was hinting for people to praise him, especially his good looks. As for not being affected by fortune, this was the biggest joke in the world. If William had his way, he would loot every bandit group, the treasury of every corrupt noble, and even sneak to and secretly mine the hidden resources in any empire he visited. Among James' bloodline, William shared his greedy character when it comes to hoarding fortune. As long as it had value, the half-elf would definitely snatch it without fail. Then how about this? Let Chloe teach you how to become a Familia Mancer, Claire, who had just finished eating her pancake, proposed. Regardless of what you think, you still need someone to teach you how to properly wield your newfound powers. We are Celeste's familiar, so we know a thing or two about familiars. What do you say? William glanced at the small familiar that looked like a young version of Celeste. He had a good impression of Claire because the latter had a good head on her shoulders. She also had this very calming personality that was very hard to reject. The half-elf would have readily agreed to this proposal if Claire had volunteered herself to be the one teaching William the way of being a Familia Mancer. However, the little familiar had delegated her all-brawn and no-brains twin sister, Chloe, to teach William. He glanced at the little fairy who was busy eating her pancake. Chloe's cheeks were bulging like a hamster that had stuffed its cheek pouches full, from overeating, and seemed completely oblivious of the discussion. After remembering what the maniacal familiar did to the Bifrost Bridge, William was very apprehensive in agreeing to Claire's proposal. "How about you teach me instead?" William inquired. "I think you would be a better teacher." Claire smiled but firmly shook her head. "That may be true, but I feel like both of us are going to get along really well," Claire replied. "For me, this is not a good thing. I don't want to feel attachment to people. It makes me feel weak." The little familiar gazed at William with her calm, steady, grey eyes that seemed to know all the secrets of the world. William had a feeling that only very strong emotions could make ripples in those grey depths that seemed to hold the entire world at an arm's length. William could feel that Claire was being sincere with him. The familiar didn't want to form any attachment, so she decided to push the responsibility to her twin sister, who had the ability to demolish the castle of Asgard if she were to use 70% of her true power. Chiffon quietly fed the golden piglet, bacon, a piece of pancake. The piglet was currently on top of the table and enjoying his master's affection. Schreur, on the other hand, had transformed into an armguard and equipped itself into Chiffon's left arm. Just like Svalin, the mythical mace chose to stay with Chiffon and ensure that she was protected from harm. Chiffon was still a bit angry because her quality time with William had come to a premature end, but she also respected her lover's will to become stronger. Since she was his wife, Chiffon decided to support William in whatever endeavor he chose. After hearing Claire's proposal, she, too, glanced at the little familiar who had just asked for another serving of pancakes from one of the elven maids. Only after finishing her 9th pancake did Chloe feel that something was amiss. She glanced at everyone present at the table and realized that all of them were looking at her. Chloe frowned, but this only lasted for a brief moment. After that brief moment of hesitation, Celeste's familiar once again asked for another serving of pancake, which made everyone's lips twitch at the same time. After breakfast, William decided to compromise and accept Claire's suggestion. Celeste, on the other hand, felt amused by this turn of events. The beautiful elf wondered if Chloe was up to the task of teaching someone on how to become a Familia Mancer. Regardless of how it turned out, this was something that Celeste would like to see with her own eyes. William led the group to the training field. There was something that he had to test, so he decided to see just how strong a familiar was. Chloe's performance in the Bifrost Bridge had left a lasting impression on him. He wanted to fully understand how a small familiar like her could deal that much damage, even with her small body. "When my master, Selene, taught me dark magic, the two of us would often spar together," William said as he turned around to look at Chloe. "If you want to become my master, you need to prove yourself first. Let's fight. Show me how strong a familiar is." Chloe's eyes widened in shock. She didn't expect that William would challenge her to a fight. Celeste and Claire, who were standing at the side, sneered in their hearts. Among the three of them, Chloe was the one who advocated violence. The thing that she liked the most was to smash and beat up things that blocked her way. After the initial shock ended, Chloe's eyes sparkled in delight. She then turned her head to look at her twin, Claire, with a big smile on her face. "Ha! I told you that fighting is the best way to build relationships, but you didn't want to believe me." Chloe had a smug expression on her face, which made Claire sigh internally. "Hold your punches, okay? We don't want you to accidentally kill him," Claire replied. "Don't worry, I will do it in mode modera." Moderation. Yes. I will do it with moderation. Chloe shifted her gaze to William and the smile on her face widened. Celeste and Claire lit a candle for William. In their hearts they already knew that the word moderation was not in Chloe's dictionary. She couldn't even spell the words right even if her life depended on it. Chapter 654, The Juggernaut of Hestia Academy Part 2. William summoned his wooden staff and took a fighting stance. Chloe, on the other hand, just crossed her arms over her chest. She had a confident smile plastered on her face. For a brief moment, William felt that no matter what he threw at her, the little familiar in front of him would be able to withstand it without fail. "Are you ready?" William asked. Chloe didn't answer. Instead, she raised her right index finger and made the "come and get me" gesture at William. William took a step forward and charged at her directly. Since he wanted to test Chloe's abilities, he should be the one to initiate the attack. With a powerful thrust, William's staff came flying towards the small familiar in a straight line. Chloe hovered in the air with her wings flapping behind her back. She had no intention of dodging William's attack. In fact, she, too, wanted to know what the half-elf was capable of doing. When the tip of the staff was only a few inches away from Chloe's body, the familiar casually raised her hand and punched it. Suddenly, an unexpected thing happened. The other end of the staff slammed on William's chest, sending him flying several meters in the air. Chiffon, who was holding Bacon in her arms, gasped in shock after seeing the unbelievable scene. Celeste and Claire didn't have any changes in their expression. It was as if they had already expected this to happen. William immediately propped himself on the ground and massaged his right chest that was currently making breathing difficult for him. Everything happened so fast, and he didn't have the opportunity to react to Chloe's counterattack. This was the first time that his attack had been turned against him in this manner, and he found it unbelievable. "Optimus, what do you think?" William inquired. "Did you gauge how strong she is?" "No. However, we can see her stats if you pay 100,000 God points." "Do it." William's God points had dwindled to 1,000,000 after purchasing the legendary weapons for his battle with Belial. Fortunately, there was a hidden quest that activated after he acquired the 51st floor, which gained him 5,000,000 God points as a reward. Although 100,000 God points to view the stats of his enemy was not a small sum, he still decided to do it. Why? Because he wanted to know just how strong his opponent was. Spending 100,000 God points to use advance appraisal skill. Remaining God points, 6,240,042. The corner of William's lips twitched after he saw the stats of the little familiar in front of him. He couldn't believe that Chloe's stats were actually stronger than his. Name, Chloe. Race, familiar. Health points, 30,000/30,000. Mana, 100/100. Strength, 999, plus 999 if Juggernaut activates. Agility, 100. Vitality, 100. Intelligence, 5. Dexterity, 100. Skills. Combat Mastery X. Unarmed Mastery X. Progenitor Instinct X. Weapon Mastery X. Overwhelming Strike X, can be used 3x a day. Dual X. Stunning Strike. World-Ending Strike. Titles. Might over Magic. Juggernaut. Progenitor Instinct X. The sixth sense allows your body to move subconsciously to prevent any form of damage. This skill has a 30% chance of activation. Might over Magic. Has the power to nullify any kind of law or ability using brute strength. Increase resistance against magic attacks by 50%. The side effect of using this ability is being unable to stop cursing the one responsible for activating this ability. Juggernaut. Increases strength by 100% if health points is equal or below 70%. Strength stat cannot be lowered by spells or other abilities. World-Ending Strike. The damage of this attack is equivalent to the strength stat multiplied by 2. Your world will end if you get hit by this, along with the chances of you leaving any descendants behind. Deals 1000% additional damage if it hits anything below the belt. What kind of bullsh *T character sheet is this? William cursed internally. Progenitor instinct. World-ending strike? Dayfuck is this *T? The half-elf couldn't believe that such a cheat character existed. Even he, who had a system, didn't have stats that surpassed 500 points. Also, that was not the end of it. If Chloe suffered damage and her HP fell below 70%, her already cheat-like strength doubled. The second part that made William's liver ache was Chloe's skills. All of them were designed for close combat, and she even had the skills Overwhelming Strike and Dual X. These skills were William's trump cards, and he was well aware how powerful this combination was. Overwhelming Strike X. Thrice a day you can deliver one full-powered unarmed strike that contains all of your strength. Damage dealt is equivalent to your strength stat multiplied by 20. Knockback effect. Overwhelming Strike was a monk skill that multiplied the strength stat by 20. William had used it to defeat several opponents because this skill was something that they wouldn't expect. Chloe's strength stat without the Juggernaut ability was already 999. If she were to use this skill, her strength stats would be multiplied by 20, and would jump to 19,980. William had no doubt in his mind that if Chloe were to punch Drahum, the ancient golem of the Silver Moon continent, the bastard would be blown to bits instantly. The half-elf could only use this skill once a day, but Chloe could use it 3 times a day. With such a powerful skill at her arsenal, very few individuals under the realm of demigod would be her match. Another skill that was worth noting was Dual X. This skill would force her opponent to exchange one blow against her. William could already feel his liver itching for the second time at the thought of these skills being used on him. Even Optimus was speechless after it saw Chloe's stats. The system had no doubt in its mind that the only way that William could win against the small familiar was using the prestige class, Ain Herjar. While William was sweating buckets internally, the little familiar raised her chin arrogantly and cursed him out loud. "Is that your best?" Chloe asked in disdain. The side effect of her lawbreaker skill had activated. "We just clashed once and you're already in a daze. The auntie in the canteen of Hestia Academy packs a stronger punch than you. What's wrong? Did you get scared that you can't even fight back? As expected of a half-elf, your face looks like a P***SSY. William almost spat blood then and there. He had used those very same curses at his enemies in the past, and they went livid upon hearing it. Now that the same curses were being used against him, he felt like his intestines were hurting. The little familiar was still not satisfied and continued to ridicule William in a haughty manner. "I am only using 30% of my full power," Chloe declared in arrogance. "HMP. If you can make me use 70% of my powers, I will recognize you as my disciple. Now fight me." Chiffon, who was watching on the side, was half worried, and half amused with her husband's current state. She was worried because it seemed that William's opponent was stronger than him, and half amused because this was the first time that she saw William have a constipated expression on his face. Celeste and Claire were snickering in their hearts because this was a very common scene in Hestia Academy. Chloe had been labeled as the Juggernaut of Hestia Academy because she was the Academy's hoodlum. Even the headmaster was powerless against her. The only way to pacify her was to shower her with praises, and give her rewards from time to time. In time, the students, professors, and staff of the Academy had learned how to deal with the notorious familiar that flew around the Academy. This was the first time that William fought Chloe, so Celeste and Claire were sure that the half-elf would find her to be a very hard opponent to defeat. William closed his eyes and calmed his breathing. He knew that there were many powerful beings in Hestia, but he didn't expect that he would find someone as strong as Chloe. Of course, the little familiar was not an omnipotent existence. Granted, she was indeed strong. However, if she were thrown to fight against Belial's horde of monsters, Chloe would definitely be defeated because her forte lay on one-on-one battles. Even if she was capable of beating a dozen opponents simultaneously, she was not like William, who could fight against tens of thousands of enemies at the same time. If you look at this angle, then Chloe was not that powerful. But, the fact still remained that William wasn't fighting an army. He was fighting a single foe, and her power required him to take the battle seriously. It was at that moment when the atmosphere around William changed. His red hair grew and turned silver. Chloe also felt the changes in William's current state. However, instead of feeling anxious, a devilish smile appeared on her face. Stormacala and Solile appeared beside William. The two sentient weapons floated in the air as their bodies were covered in lightning and fire. Name: William von Ainsworth. Race: half-elf. Health points: 365,100/365,100. Mana: 396,600/396,600. Job class: Quick Shot Shepherd, level 30. Subclass: Einherjar, max level. Strength: 258, plus 972. Agility: 275, plus 997. Vitality: 254, plus 966. Intelligence: 295, plus 1027. Dexterity: 315, plus 1058. William understood that he would be facing strong opponents in the future. If he didn't even have the courage to face Chloe, then what was the purpose of him wanting to be stronger? Although his opponent dominated one-on-one battles, William didn't believe that he would be defeated easily if he went all out. Good, Chloe said with a smile. That's more like it. Since you decided to fight me seriously, I will use 60% of my power. Chloe took a fighting stance and her body glowed golden. Familia Oversoul, Chloe declared. Suddenly a powerful shockwave erupted in the surroundings. The little familiar's body grew until her height was the same as Chiffon's. William stared at the young teenage version of Celeste, whose presence had changed drastically. Since William had already used the appraisal skill on Chloe once, he could use this skill again to check her stats without paying any additional god points. He immediately used his appraisal skill and checked the information of his opponent that was using 60% of her full power. Name: Chloe. Race: familiar. Health points: 150,000/150,000. Mana: 2,500/2,500. Strength: 5,000, plus 5,000 if Juggernaut activates. Agility: 500. Vitality: 500. Intelligence: 50. Dexterity: 500. William didn't expect that Chloe had a second form. Also, her stats had drastically increased as well. Although William's overall stats were stronger, Chloe's strength stat was nothing to sneeze at. If he were to get hit by her punch, he would definitely feel a world of pain. Chloe's beautiful face beamed with delight as she took a fighting stance. It had been a while since she had taken this form, and she was more than happy to go on a rampage after being cooped up in Hestia Academy for too long. Both of them were now in the initial stages of the saint rank. Celeste, Claire, and Chiffon had retreated to a safe distance to allow the two fighters to go all out. They knew that they would only get in the way of the battle if they stayed. William looked at his opponent with a serious expression on his face. This was no longer a spar. This was a battle that would let the half-elf understand his limitations, while he was using the strongest job class in his arsenal. The half-elf didn't expect that he would be using his prestige class so soon, and he had to admit that his odds of winning against Chloe was 50-50. "Are you ready?" Chloe asked. This time, she was the one to take the initiative to ask William if he was ready. This was her way of showing respect to her opponent that had decided to go all out against her. "Yes," William replied. "I am ready." William understood that Chloe's threat was very real. If the familiar really intended to use Dual X and overwhelming strike against him, he would have to put his life on the line, in order to survive the punch that was strong enough to obliterate the castle of Asgard with a single blow. Chapter 655, Charge, My Knights of the Round Table. Part 1. William and Chloe were about to clash, when the system reminded William that it wouldn't be safe to fight near the castle using his full power. Wait. The half-elf immediately raised a hand to stop Chloe from charging at him. Let's change location. I don't want the castle to be destroyed. Chloe smirked and nodded her head. She then followed William as the latter flew towards the plains of Asgard, where the great battle of Ragnarok took place. Seeing that both fighters were changing location, Celeste and Claire followed suit using a flight spell. Chiffon, on the other hand, summoned B1 and B2. The two dumb birds merged with Chiffon and became her wings. She was still wary of Celeste and her familiars, so she didn't want them to be alone with William. If any of them made any suspicious moves on her husband, she would activate her divinity and devour them without mercy. When the pink-haired girl arrived at the plains of Asgard, the battle had already begun. Lightning and flames streaked across the battlefield as William fought Chloe in ranged combat. Although William was also a melee fighter, his opponent's strength stat was a powerful deterrent that prevented him from engaging in close combat. Chloe may not be as fast as William, but his attacks did very little damage to her because of her powerful skill set. After firing several long-range skills, William decided that he should take precautions just in case the battle went out of hand. Optimus, please, disable the passive skill, one who breaks the rules, William ordered. Understood. Although William was willing to test his limits, he didn't want to lose memories over this battle. The battle against Belial had hurt him deeply, because several important memories were lost, with no chances of returning ever again. Although they were memories of the past, William still treasured them in his heart. Cheap shot! Chloe shouted. If you dare, let me hit you once. William ignored the familiar's taunts and maneuvered around the battlefield. He used his superior speed to stay out of Chloe's range, and just peppered her with Stormcaller's and Soleil's elemental attacks. Quick Shot War Art's first form. William aimed Stormcaller at the familiar who was like a sitting duck waiting to get bullied from afar. Destroy everything in your path. Railgun. This was one of William's strongest, and fastest attacks, that was strong enough to pierce through a mountain with ease. He wanted to test how Chloe would be able to handle an attack that surpassed the speed of sound. When William unleashed his skill, Chloe's leg also rose up. Soon a deafening sound erupted in the air as William's railgun was completely neutralized by the familiar's kick. Nice! Chloe's eyes narrowed. That is one dangerous ability you have there. William observed the familiar's foot, but not even a scratch could be seen on its surface. Clearly, his attack didn't deal any damage to his opponent, which made him take the battle extra seriously. Bloom in the battlefield. William roared. Fleur du Soleil. Soleil that was floating high above the clouds to absorb the power of the sun descended towards Chloe with fury. Its body was covered in flames and streaked towards its target like a meteorite. Fist of the South Star. Chloe shouted as she met the flaming spear head-on and punched it. Another powerful explosion took place in the air, sending William skidding a few meters from where he hovered. He stared at the beautiful flaming flower in the sky, and knew that Soleil hit its target perfectly. However, at the center of the flaming flower, a young lady with short blonde hair with curls at the end, stared back at him with a devilish grin. Her beautiful blue eyes stared at William like a hawk targeting its prey, and it made the half-elf's evaluation of her rise another level. The power of a progenitor cannot be underestimated. Since they are the first of their kind, it also means that their powers are far above the norm. Be careful, Will. William nodded his head. He had read in some novels that vampire progenitors were stronger than other vampires because they were the first generation. As the first generation of familiars, Chloe's and Claire's powers far exceeded the norm, and far exceeded William's expectations. Try to find her weak point, William ordered. Understood. Unlike his railgun attack, Soleil managed to cause a bit of damage to Chloe. However, they were very insignificant. Her clothes were burned in some places, but that was it. William was paying close attention to her stats and noticed that her Juggernaut skill still hadn't activated. This meant that her health was still good, and so Lyle's destructive attack was only akin to a small scratch. "'Tis but a scratch," Chloe said as she clenched her fist. "Since you don't plan to come to me, I'll make you come to me by force." The girl, who was as tall as chiffon, pointed at William with a sneer. "Dual X?" William was about to scoff at the familiar's bluff when suddenly, he felt his body being pulled towards her. The half-elf's eyes widened in shock because he made sure to stay out of the range of the forced aggression skill Dual X. Since he had used it several times in the past, he was quite familiar with its range. He believed that as long as he stayed away, Chloe wouldn't be able to force him to fight her in close combat. What he didn't know was that Chloe's Dual X was different from his. The familiar's Dual X worked regardless of distance. As long as she could see her target, she could pull them to her location anytime she wanted. *T. William cursed out loud as he summoned Erendite from his storage ring. "Cut through the firmament!" William roared. "Raise the world, Erendite!" A reddish-black beam of light erupted at the tip of the demonic sword and flew towards the familiar, who was also flying towards William with a fearless grin. Chloe pulled back her arm and her closed fist shone brightly. "World-ending strike!" Chloe shouted as she met William's attack with her bare fist. The powerful beam and the small fist collided, but William's attack was soon split in half. Chloe's attack broke through its center and the familiar flew towards William while roaring in laughter. William braced himself as he clashed with Chloe using his full-powered strike. A metallic sound rang in the air, sending shockwaves in every direction. William heard a resounding crack, followed by searing pain on his right hand. He knew that his right hand, and arm, had been broken, but that was the least of his worries. After the clash ended, William decisively pulled back and gained distance from the familiar, whose eyes had turned golden. Chloe's Juggernaut skill had activated due to the damage she received from Erendite, and now her strength stat had doubled. She hovered in the air and looked at William with a smile. "I'll give you an opportunity to heal yourself," Chloe said with arrogance. "I don't want others to think that I'm bullying you." William chuckled internally because of the familiar's condescending words. He looked at his arm that was bent in an unnatural angle and allowed the system to scan the extent of the damage he received. Fortunately, Erendite's attack had greatly lessened the force of Chloe's attack. If the attack had hit him with its full power, his arm might have been torn off from his body due to its overwhelming raw power. If she used the overwhelming strike, I might have become a goner, William thought as he drank a high-quality rejuvenation potion. Although he didn't want to use any healing abilities during their battle, he deemed that it was necessary to face such a cheat-like character in his peak condition. Several cracking and popping sounds reached his ear as the damage in his arm recovered. Chloe watched this scene with fascination, with her hands resting on her waist. After William's arm had fully recovered, the familiar once again took a fighting stance before giving her opponent an ultimatum. "I will end this in the next attack," Chloe stated. "If you have any trump cards left, use them now. I guarantee that you will not have an opportunity to use it again." William knew that the familiar wasn't joking around. He still wanted to test a few things, but he decided that it would be useless against her. He had already realized this when he used Erendite against her. Erendite was a sword that was said to be equal and even more powerful than Excalibur. Chloe's skill, might over magic, was the perfect counter to magical attacks. William was half tempted to ask the system to enable the skill that he asked to be locked, but decided against it. It simply was not worth it to sacrifice his memories just to beat the opponent in front of him. The air trembled around William as the elements of earth, water, wind, fire, and lighting gathered in his right hand. Soon, these elements merged together, forming a rainbow-colored ball of pure energy. Chloe yawned because she knew that this kind of attack wouldn't deal any damage to her. She thought that William had other tricks under his sleeve, but she was greatly disappointed. "Heroes of Valhalla," William said, and 13 perfect clones appeared all around him. Each of the clones carried the legendary weapons in their arsenal, and their presence made Chloe narrow her eyes. Just like William had suspected, Chloe was more of a one-on-one fighter. Her ability to deal with multiple opponents at once was not her strong point. This was especially true for opponents that had similar power levels like William's. "Well, at least you're not stupid, I'll give you that." Chloe's expression finally became serious, but the smile on her lips didn't disappear. Her entire body glowed golden, and the fairy-like wings behind her back were set ablaze in golden flames. 70%, Chloe said softly. Not bad. Chloe had finally used 70% of her power, which increased her strength stat by 500, and her other stats by 100. Claire, who was looking at her twin from a distance, smiled. It had been so long since she had seen Chloe this happy, and it made her happy as well. However, Celeste, who was floating beside her, had a serious expression on her face. She had prepared a spell on her hand that would automatically summon Chloe to her side in case of an emergency. Celeste was afraid that Chloe might get carried away and use her overwhelming strike on William. The beautiful elf knew that if something happened to her sister's disciple, Celine, would definitely not take it lying down, and might even hate her for it forever. Chapter 656, Charge, My Knights of the Round Table. Part 2. 14 Williams faced off against the beautiful familiar, who was looking at them with a fearless smile. "Come," Chloe said. "Or do you want me to force you to come to me?" William raised his hand and his clones took a battle formation. This was his strongest combination attack, and if Chloe managed to beat this, then William had no choice but to recognize her superiority. "For honor and glory. Conquer my way to victory," William ordered. "Charge, my Knights of the Round Table." The 13 clones glowed and turned into rays of light. All of them flew towards Chloe as the powers of the legendary weapons activated in their hands. "Go for the kill, Gabulg." The legendary spear that was said to give its enemies a very gruesome and painful death shot towards Chloe with the intention of ending her life. The familiar turned her body to the side, evading the attack by a hair's breadth. "Strike with unparalleled precision, Gungnir." The spear that was said to belong to the king of the Norse gods, Odin, flew straight and true. This spear was said to have the uncanny ability to never miss its target, regardless of the proficiency of its wielder. "Exterminate, Kersalakatos." A rain of arrows covered the skies, turning the surroundings dark. The Aridips had an eerie green glow that was said to contain strong poison that was very effective against women. Chloe was facing the rain of arrows, while Gungnir came flying towards her from behind. However, the familiar was not fazed. She reached out behind her without even turning her head, and grabbed the tip of Gungnir's spear blade, stopping it in its flight. Fiery, golden blood seeped out of the wound on Chloe's hand, as she firmly held the spear at bay. A moment later, she grabbed the handle of the spear and twirled it around in front of her, deflecting the arrows that were falling onto her like rain. Although Chloe specialized in unarmed combat, her passive ability, Weapon Master X, allowed her to effectively wield any kind of weapon she got her hands on. As the barrage of arrows were thinning out, a powerful voice reached her ear from behind. "Pierce through the void. Longinus." Chloe shifted her body to the side, and a shower of golden fiery blood exploded into the air. Longinus had pierced through her left arm, but Chloe continued to deflect the arrows even with the spear sticking out of her shoulder. She had deemed the arrows to be a higher threat to her compared to the spear that was now struck in her body. "Illuminate the world. Wrong Ominiad. Cut through the firmament and raise the world. Erendite." 2 beams of lights, one white, one black, descended on Chloe from opposite directions. The wings on her back glowed brightly, as her body was enveloped by a golden shield. The 2 beams hit their mark and exploded in mid-air. It created a mushroom-type explosion that momentarily blinded everyone in the battlefield. When the light receded, a young lady with tattered clothes appeared in everyone's vision. Her clothes were almost non-existent, revealing a body riddled with injury. Blood flowed everywhere, and anyone who saw it would definitely feel their heart breaking, due to the violence that was done on such a young girl. However, although she was currently in a very sorry state, Chloe's eyes were still clear and her lips still held the makings of a smile, despite her current condition. "Dual axe," Chloe said as she pointed her finger at William. The half-elf's body lurched forward, but he was not bothered by it. The power in his hand had reached its peak state. Even if Chloe had the ability might over magic, this attack that contained all the powerful elements in the world would devastate everything in its path. "World End Tempest!" William roared as he thrust his right hand forward. Chloe pulled back her arm as a powerful aura fluctuated in the air. When all of the power in her body had been gathered in her hand, she unleashed the strongest attack in her arsenal. An attack that was strong enough to smash Drum to pieces. Overwhelming strike. Chloe met William's attack with her own. The moment the two attacks collided with each other, another powerful explosion rocked the entire floor of Asgard. William's clones were blown away and turned into particles of light. Chiffon, Celeste, and Claire were pushed back by the powerful shockwaves for several hundred meters before coming to a stop. As if coming to an understanding, the three of them immediately flew towards the glowing, miniature sun that was currently floating in the place where William and Chloe clashed. This was the first great battle that happened on the floor of Asgard since its conception, and it left a mark in the memories of everyone that was there to witness the battle unfold. Crater Empire. Ash abruptly woke up from her slumber when she felt a searing pain on the blue gem that was embedded in her chest. She gasped for breath because the pain was too much for her to bear. Princess Sidonie, who was sleeping beside her, also woke up. However, it wasn't the princess that was currently in charge of the body, but her other half, Morgana. Morgana used her powers to help stabilize Ash's body as the latter endured the excruciating pain in her body. Several minutes later, the beautiful mermaid collapsed on the bed, completely bereft of any strength. Morgana was alarmed and immediately took out a pill from her storage ring and force-fed it to Ash, who was currently in a semi-vegetative state. A few minutes later, the mermaid's finger twitched, before slowly opening her eyes. The current Ash looked very haggard as if she just fought 100 battles non-stop. "For now, regulate your breathing," Morgana said as she helped Ash into a sitting position. "Don't worry, I'm here. It will be all right." Ash weakly leaned her back on Morgana's body, and the latter held her firmly in an embrace. After several minutes, the mermaid's breathing had returned to normal, but she was still feeling very weak. What happened? Princess Sidonie had swapped with Morgana and held Ash in her place. Did something happen to Will? Yes, Ash replied with difficulty. I don't know the specifics, but it seems that he fought an intense battle, while pushing himself to the limit. However, you don't need to worry. He is fine. Because Ash gave half of her heart to William, she was able to feel his strong emotions, as well as the overflowing influx of power that came from her lover. When William activated the Heroes of Valhalla, and unleashed the full-powered World End Tempest, the excess energy traveled through time and space to reach Ash, who was sleeping peacefully in the Crater Empire. Princess Sidonie frowned as she pieced the clues together. Suddenly a realization came to her mind. Will is currently staying on the floor of Asgard, Princess Sidonie said. If I remember correctly, no one should be able to enter that floor. If what you said is true, doesn't it mean that Will just fought with someone, and this person is very strong? For him to use all of his powers, and make you feel its effects just proves that this battle wasn't a simple one. Ash nodded because she didn't realize this fact right away. Although they weren't able to meet William in the Thousand Beast domain, they were still able to communicate just fine. William had told her about his current circumstance, so both girls knew that he couldn't leave the tower, and had to stay in the floor of Asgard for an entire month. Not only that, he said that no one could enter the floor during this period of time. If that was the case, then who was it that their lover had fought? Let's go to the Thousand Beast domain, Princess Sidonie stated. Let's get our answers from there. I'm sure that one of Will's people will know the answers to our questions. Ash nodded her head. A few seconds later, both girls disappeared from the room, and teleported to the Thousand Beast domain. There they would discover that a certain elven beauty had wandered to William's floor of Asgard, which made them shake their heads helplessly. Chapter 657, Collecting the Sinful Ladies of the World. Another one? Ash inquired. B1 nodded his head in confirmation. Another one? Her name? Princess Sidonie asked. B2 pruned his feathers before answering. Celeste. The two beautiful ladies glanced at each other. Although they hadn't seen her before, they were quite familiar with the name, Celeste. William had told them a bit about his master's twin sister, who was a well-known prodigy in the Silver Moon continent. The only thing that confused the two ladies was how Celeste managed to appear on the floor of Asgard when it was still closed to the public. Is she beautiful? Princess Sidonie asked. She still hadn't seen Celine, but according to Ash, she was quite a beautiful woman, and quite possibly William's first crush. Even so, Princess Sidonie prided herself of her beauty. She believed that no matter how beautiful Celeste was, she was still more beautiful than her. Very beautiful, B1 answered. Who is more beautiful, me or her? Princess Sidonie inquired with a serious expression on her face. B1 and B2 glanced at each other before looking at Sidonie with an expression that matched her seriousness. For them, all of William's lovers were beautiful, but of course, the two dumb birds were biased, so they answered Princess Sidonie's inquiry with what they felt was right. Chiffon is more beautiful than her, B1 replied. B2 nodded in agreement. That's right. Our Chiffon is the most beautiful of all. The corner of Princess Sidonie's lips twitched as she looked at the two dumb birds who had returned to grooming their feathers. I didn't ask you if Chiffon was more beautiful than her, okay? Why aren't you giving me a straight answer? Ash, who was looking at the side, covered her lips and giggled. She had now recovered from her weakened state after drinking a recovery potion that William had left for her. The beautiful mermaid found Princess Sidonie's question very endearing. However, she understood her concern. Celine was truly beautiful. If her twin was a perfect replica of her, then there was a chance that William would also think of her as someone very attractive. She already knew that William wasn't someone that was easily attracted to beauty. But, if that beauty looked exactly like someone that you love, it was impossible to not feel anything. This was especially true for someone like William, who cared too much about his lovers, and the important people in his life. Princess Sidonie kept pressing the two dumb birds for answers, but she wasn't satisfied with their replies. It was quite unfortunate that William couldn't drag them to the floor of Asgard because of certain restrictions that were in place. After getting a general understanding of what happened, they returned to the Creator Empire to look after another problem child, who was still in deep sleep. Kenneth was still asleep, and hadn't woken up since his last battle with Lilith. The silver-haired elf was currently sleeping in Princess Sidonie's guest room because she was afraid that others would take him away if he was left somewhere. The Amazon delegation had all returned to the Ares Empire with one exception, and that was Lilith. Princess Sidonie and Ash had a feeling that she remained in order to meet William when he returned from the Tower of Babylon. Of course, the Amazon Empress had already sent an elite team to go to the tower to make contact with William. Unfortunately, the floor of Asgard wouldn't be open to anyone until a year had passed. The delegation from various forces in the lands had gathered in the city of Babylon to wait for William to make his appearance. They were there to do everything in their power to negotiate with William, and see if they could strike a deal for the ownership of some of the floors that were currently under his name. All the floors in the Tower of Babylon held various lands and resources that would make any empire, kingdom, or clans rub their hands in greed. The temptation was too much to resist, and some of them were not afraid to use any means to get the result that their sovereigns had ordered them to get. A few hours later, Lilith appeared in Princess Sidonie's room to have a chat with her and Ian. This had become part of her regular routine, which irritated Princess Sidonie. The beautiful princess didn't bother to hide her annoyance and showed it openly to one of her sisters who bore a similar sin to hers. "Why are you so hostile?" Lilith inquired as she arched her brow. "It's not as if I'm going to steal your man. I have standards, you know. My man is not good enough for you, so scram," Princess Sidonie replied with a glare. "Tisk. Tisk. Tisk." Lilith wagged her finger at the beautiful princess, who was so close to slapping her with her feathered fan. "It is not up to you to decide whether your man is good enough or not," Lilith replied as she crossed her arms over her chest. "I will be the judge of that. Believe me, I'm a very good judge when it comes to good men." Ian eyed the champion of the tournament from behind Princess Sidonie. Since William was away, Ian had become one of the retainers under Princess Sidonie's employ. In the past, this kind of setup might have been frowned upon by the royal family. However, after William's outstanding achievement was announced to the world, Emperor Leonidas had a change of heart and allowed William's follower to work under his granddaughter. This was the "what belongs to you, also belongs to me" mentality, and Emperor Leonidas was similar to James in this regard. If a profit could be made, he would gladly compromise to make both parties happy. For some reason, Ian didn't find Lilith repulsive in the slightest. She had been around Princess Sidonie, Morgana, and Chiffon, who all bore the divinity of the 7 deadly sins, and the mermaid had developed a certain level of curiosity towards these ladies who had been marked by the gods since that day they were born into the world. In truth, Ian found them pitiful. Princess Sidonie would suffer several strong urges of lust when her divinity was starting to get out of her control. William and her had to be by the princess' side in order to control the power that was close to a breaking point. Chiffon was another pitiful girl, whom Ian had a soft spot for. Unlike Princess Sidonie, who had a strong and bold personality, the pink-haired girl was like a little angel who would quietly eat in the corner of the room, in order to not get in anyone's way. Deep inside, she was very happy that Chiffon had married William. Ian knew that her lover would care for his young bride, and ensure that she would never go hungry again. If not for the fact that she had also married William back in the southern continent, along with Wendy, she might have thrown a tantrum like Princess Sidonie did, after she learned that the little girl had married William before her. "Will, I hope that you don't develop the hobby of collecting the sinful ladies of this world," Ash mused. "One of them might bring about your downfall." Ian didn't know why, but she had a feeling that there was a possibility that those who would share her lover, would all be members of the 7 deadly sins. If that was the case, then the future would definitely be filled with uncertainty, because each and every one of them was a bomb that was waiting to explode at a moment's notice. Chapter 658, Lesson about Familiars. Now, let's talk about familiars. Inside the conference room of Asgard, Chloe stood on top of the table with a smile on her face. William was seated in front of her and listened to her speech. On his right side, a pink-haired girl's head rested on his chest with her eyes closed. She had decided to stick beside William and learn a little bit about this unique profession. Chloe was in a very good mood, so she didn't mind that William brought an extra to her class. Although she would teach at the academy as a substitute to Celeste from time to time, this was not her forte. Claire was the one who was more proficient in teaching, but since the latter didn't want to feel attached to William, the duty of teaching him fell on Chloe's shoulder. Familiars are different from beast companions, Chloe explained. When you plan to have a beast companion, all you need to do is form an agreement, a pact, or a contract with them. Of course, you can also force them to submission by beating them up. As if to make her point, the little familiar raised her little fist and shook it in the air. She was someone that liked to beat up things, so she would always promote violence over a peaceful negotiation. However, familiars are different, Chloe continued her explanation. There are 2 kinds of familiars. Those that you can summon from the world, or different planes, and the ones that you give life using a part of your existence. I will explain more about this in a while. Frankly, it is too troublesome to do this, but since you are now my disciple, I will make sure that you understand how summoning a familiar works. William gave his sixth master a brief nod to tell her that he was paying attention to her. "Claire, if you please," Chloe called out to her twin sister who was seated not far from her. Claire nodded her head and green flames erupted from her fingertips. The flames formed into words and hovered above Chloe's head like the writing seen on a whiteboard. "The two types of familiars have their advantages and disadvantages," Chloe stated. "Those that you can summon from planes of existence vary in power. Some are incredibly weak, while some are incredibly strong. These familiars would bind themselves to you with an agreement or contract. Some will ask for a few years of your life, while some would require you to do things like killing all the citizens of a city in a day. The stronger the familiar, the stronger its requirements." Chloe paused to let William digest the meaning of her words. The little familiar then glanced at Celeste, who was seated at the corner of the conference room. As Chloe's owner, she was there to support Chloe as she taught her very first disciple. Although the current arrangement was a bit complicated, Celeste didn't mind as long as William received proper education about the path of a Familia Mancer. Celeste smiled and nodded her head at Chloe to tell her that she was doing well with her explanation. After getting her master's encouragement, Chloe resumed her lesson. "The second type is purely creation," Chloe said. "The power of the familiar depends on the kind of ritual you choose. In this ritual, you can choose to summon a familiar using an artifact, your blood, or your soul." "Claire, I can't explain this part well. Take over for me." A groan answered Chloe's statement. Clearly, Claire wasn't in the mood to explain things. However, before she could reject, her twin had already grabbed onto her and dragged her onto the top of the table. Claire sighed before looking at Chloe with a disgruntled face. The latter only smiled and encouraged her twin sister to take charge of the troublesome explanation. "Like my sister mentioned, there are two types of familiars," Claire said lazily. "My sister and I are born through creation. If you choose to summon a familiar using this method, the familiar will forever be loyal to you. Although those that are summoned from other planes of existence could do the same, some of them may leave you if they feel that their lives are threatened. This is the difference between a summoned familiar and a familiar born from creation. If I were you, I'd just choose the creation method so we can all go home and call it a day," Claire stated, completely devoid of motivation. William's liver itched due to Claire's complete lack of interest in teaching him things about familiars. Although Chloe was quite troublesome, her approach to teaching was 100 times better than Claire's. "Claire, explain this properly, or else he might just randomly summon a familiar without fully understanding their difference. It's too troublesome. Just let him summon one so we can go back to the academy. I missed reading books in the library." "Okay. If you don't teach him properly, I will wreck the library when we return to the academy." Claire blinked once then twice while looking at her twin, who had a big smile on her face. Chloe was not someone who made threats lightly. Whenever she declared something, she would do it without fail, which made Claire feel annoyed. "How many times do I need to tell you that violence is not the answer?" Claire stared daggers at William. The corner of the half-elf's lips twitched when he received Claire's hostile glare. It was your sister that said that she would destroy your academy's library. Why are you looking at me like that?" William always had a good impression of Claire because of her calming effect. However, right now, the small familiar was not in the mood to cooperate and explain. For some reason, after his battle with Chloe, William felt that Claire had become a little hostile to him. What he didn't know was that his hunch was spot on. As Chloe's twin sister, she got angry at William after seeing Chloe's severely injured state at the end of their battle. Of course, Claire knew that getting hurt was only natural in a duel, but she was the type that got mad at those that hurt Chloe and Celeste. Although she, herself, understood that what she was doing was childish, there was nothing she could do about it. If William's family and lovers were his reverse scale, then Chloe and Celeste were Claire's. After a sigh, she faced William and decided to explain properly. "I'll only say this once, so listen up." Claire finally compromised. Familia Mancers and their familiars grow hand in hand. Like I said earlier, creating a familiar is much better than summoning one. Since I don't want to bother explaining the summoning method, I'll teach you the creation method. There are 3 types of creation methods. The first method is called the mica class. Claire waved her hand and green flames hovered above her head, forming rows of words that gave the information about the mica class. Mica class A miracle was born. Summons a familiar using an emblem, artifact, or an item, obtained from a dungeon, temple, kingdom, holy lands, and other places that have a high concentration of magic. The shape, size, form, race, age, gender, and other characteristics of the familiar are completely random. Familiars can be commanded to do your bidding, but they are intelligent creatures and can think for themselves. As you can see, this method is the easiest way because all you need is a catalyst, Claire stated. Once the creation is completed, the catalyst will be destroyed. If you have the horns of a dragon, or any parts of legendary beasts, there is a 10% chance that you will be able to create the same creature using this method. Take note that you can only summon a familiar once. If ever you want to summon a different familiar, the familiar you summoned first using this method will cease to exist. Claire's tone suddenly became very serious. For her, summoning another familiar just because you didn't like what you got was akin to murder. William somewhat understood what Claire was trying to say, so he nodded his head, and waited for her to continue her explanation. Claire eyed him for a few seconds before resuming her explanation. The words above her head changed, and she introduced the second way to create a familiar. Argonaut class heroes are made, not born. This method summons a familiar using the master's bloodline. The shape, size, form, race, age, gender, and other characteristics of the familiar are completely random. Familiars can be commanded to do your bidding, but they are intelligent creatures and can think for themselves. This is almost the same as the mica class, but instead of a catalyst, you will use your blood to summon your familiar. Claire smiled. This method is ideal if you have a unique ability that is exclusive in your bloodline. The influential families in this world have powerful bloodlines that have allowed them to become local warlords in their own territories. If your family belongs to this category, choosing this is quite ideal. Claire once again waved her hand and the words above her head rearranged themselves for the last time. Lazarus class god has helped. Summons a familiar using the master's bloodline and a piece of their soul. The shape, size, form, race, age, gender, and other characteristics of the familiar are completely random. Familiars can be commanded to do your bidding, but they are intelligent creatures and can think for themselves. The last class is the Lazarus class. Claire pointed a finger to her chest, before shifting it to her sister, Chloe. Chloe and I were born using this method. This requires you to use your blood, and a piece of your soul to give birth to a familiar. Take note that if you use this method, the piece of your soul that you used to summon a familiar will never again return to you. Also, don't use Chloe and I as standards. We are familiars born from the progenitor of this profession. Naturally, we are stronger than the average familiar. Summoning a familiar also requires luck. Regardless of what method you use, the result may not be as you expected. A familiar summoned using the Lazarus method might be weaker than a mica class summon. So, don't complain to us if the familiar you summon turns out to be weak. Claire didn't wait for William's reply and left the room by flying through the window. She had already done her part, and hurriedly left before her sister could drag her back to do something else. Right now, she didn't want to be around William because she was afraid. Afraid that she might not be able to control her emotions, and burn the handsome half-elf, until only his ashes remained. Chapter 659, This is a good day to be born in this world. William looked at the countless stars in the sky. These were the stars that could be seen in the world of Asgard. A world that had now ceased to exist. He was currently lying in the grasslands of Asgard and deep in thought. After their morning lesson ended, Chloe had given him some time to think about what kind of method he would use to summon a familiar of his own. He had already consulted Optimus about the best choice available to them, but even his dependable system was unsure about what course to take. Some magicians in the world of Hestia had their own familiars as well. However, an exclusive profession meant to boost the power of these familiars was something that no one had heard before. After fighting Chloe, William tasted firsthand how formidable these beings were. If he were to have his own familiar, wouldn't that drastically raise his battle prowess as well? As William pondered about these things, a soft rustling sound was heard beside him. Without saying anything, Chiffon laid down on the grass beside William and held his hand. She, too, looked at the vast starry sky that shone on them from the heavens. This was not the first time that Chiffon had seen the stars in the sky. But, being around William made this already amazing sight extra special. The half-elf gently squeezed his wife's hand before turning halfway to kiss her cheeks. Chiffon returned William's kiss and they stared at each other with gazes filled with tenderness and love. The two were about to kiss again, when a little, golden, piglet appeared between their faces and planted its snout on William's lips. Chiffon's eyes widened in shock, but this only lasted for a moment. Soon, a giggle escaped her lips because Bacon kept on kissing William, and the latter didn't know whether he should shove the piglet away, or fry him in a frying pan. After a few healthy giggles, Chiffon grabbed Bacon and held it to her chest. William summoned a handkerchief from his storage ring and wiped his lips in a meticulous manner. "Bacon, the next time you do that, I will cook you," William threatened. "Oink!" The little piglet looked at William with innocent eyes. Chiffon wasn't able to hold back another giggle at the funny exchange between her little pet and her husband, who was poking Bacon's snout with his finger. Chiffon pulled the golden piglet away from William, and gently patted its head. Bacon closed its eyes because being petted made it feel good. "Have you decided?" Chiffon asked. William shook his head and sighed. "I'll sleep on it tonight. I'll make my decision tomorrow." Chiffon nodded her head in understanding. She once again gazed at the heavens, and looked up at the stars in the sky. The stars on the floor of Asgard were very different from the stars outside the Tower of Babylon. They looked familiar, yet unfamiliar, to the pink-haired girl, whose heart was filled with love and happiness. William didn't hide anything and told Chiffon that both of them had been lovers in the past. Although a giantess and a human falling in love sounded absurd, the pink-haired girl readily believed William's story. She hadn't regained her memories about her past life, but her dreams allowed her to see the silver-haired Einherjar, and the great battle that took place, in a world that looked very similar to the floor of Asgard. William also took the form of that person, and her instinct told her that they were one and the same. For Chiffon, she didn't care about the past because it had already happened. What mattered to her was the present. And right now, she was very happy because she had found the one that would love her and not toss her away, like her father did to her mother. The two stayed in the grassland for one more hour, before returning to their quarters to rest. William tossed Bacon to the thousand-beast domain to prevent it from getting in the way of his intimate time with his wife. He already knew that Chiffon wanted to keep him for as long as she could while they were still trapped inside the Tower of Babylon, and he was more than happy to oblige his wife's request. The next morning, everyone gathered at the training ground to prepare for William's summoning ceremony. He had already decided on what method he was going to use, and prayed that he wouldn't be disappointed with the choice he made. Chloe hovered in front of William with her arms crossed over her chest. "Are you sure?" Chloe asked. "Once we do this, there is no turning back. I will ask you one last time, are you serious about using this method?" William nodded his head. "Yes. I thought about it and decided that I will choose this method." Chloe nodded her head. She was the type that didn't want to complicate things. Since her disciple had already chosen this path, she would just guide him until he had mastered how to become a full-fledged Familia Mancer. William walked towards Celeste, who was wearing a ceremonial garb. Unlike Celine, who chose clothes that wrapped her entire body, Celeste's attire was quite revealing. The half-elf was finding it hard not to stare, because the twin sisters had the same body type. The memories of when he had his way with Celine's beautiful body flashed inside his mind. In a last attempt to regain his composure, he avoided looking at those revealing curves that were making him remember fond memories of when he tumbled in the sheets with Celine. Celeste was unaware of William's thoughts and held a golden goblet in her hands. William had chosen the last method, to summon a familiar of the Lazarus class. Using this method, he would offer his blood, and a piece of his soul, in order to create a familiar that would be with him for the rest of his life. A ceremonial dagger floated in the air, and its razor-sharp teeth were pointed at William's chest. William had already taken off his upper clothes, and nodded to Celeste, telling her that he was ready. "Blood that flows within the body, give us your warmth in our time of need," Celeste said, and the dagger stabbed William's chest, before disappearing completely. A fountain of blood sprayed out, and yet, this blood didn't fall to the ground. It flowed like a small river and headed towards the golden goblet in Celeste's hand. After the golden goblet was half full, the wound on William's chest disappeared. Beauty attracts the heart, but character attracts the soul. Celeste waved her hand and William felt his inner world tremble. Suddenly, a searing pain erupted within his being, which made him scream out loud. It had been a while since he had felt this kind of pain. This was the pain he had felt when he had fought inside his spiritual domain against the astral worm who wanted to devour his soul. It was at this moment when the two orbs of light and darkness that had remained dormant inside William's consciousness finally woke up. They were the two dungeon cores that he had saved long ago, and had been sleeping inside his body for a long period of time. Right now, they were incomplete, but Celeste's ceremony had woken them from their slumber. Originally, only a piece of William's soul was needed, but when the two dungeon cores appeared, the tear on William's soul widened, until half of his soul was split from his body. That half of William's soul was divided into two once again, and the two dungeon cores merged with them. Soon, two glowing orbs of light, one light, the other black, shot out from the gem in William's chest, and flew towards the golden goblet filled with his blood. William collapsed on the ground because of the pain he was suffering. Chiffon hurriedly ran to his side and made him drink a rejuvenation potion. William's pain decreased to a level that he could endure, which made him breathe a sigh of relief. He then stared at the golden goblet that was shining with great intensity. Celeste grit her teeth as she focused all of her power to stabilize the rampaging powers within the goblet. Chloe and Claire positioned themselves beside Celeste and allowed their power to flow to their host, which decreased her burden by a good margin. After 5 full minutes that felt like eternity, a powerful beam of light erupted from the golden goblet and shot towards the heavens. Everyone waited with bated breath to check whether the summoning was successful. It was also at that moment when particles of golden light fell from the heavens. When these golden particles fell on William's body, he felt the pain in his soul slowly fading away. As William looked up at the sky, he noticed 2 small dots that were slowly descending towards his location. Celeste had also noticed this as well, but all she could see was 1 white orb, and 1 black orb. It didn't take long before the 2 orbs hovered a meter away from William's face. They didn't move from their position and stayed in a stationary state. After a minute of staring at each other, the 2 orbs glowed before dissipating into particles of light. "The air smells so fresh," one of the familiars, who looked exactly like William, said with a smile. "This is a good day to be born in this world." The one who spoke was wearing a white outfit, and a pair of angelic wings flapped softly behind its back. On top of its head, a golden halo could be seen, which reminded William of angels in his past life. Kikik. "Indeed, today is a good day to be born," another creature, who looked exactly like William, commented. The creature had 2 horns on its head, a devil's tail, and bat-like wings behind its back. Both of them stared at William with an angelic and devilish smile on their faces. They were William's 2 familiars that were born from his blood and soul, and, right now, they were looking at their master with great expectations. With just a glance, the half-elf could tell that these were no ordinary familiars. Celeste, who was looking at the 2 newly born familiar, couldn't believe what she was seeing. She didn't expect that William would be able to summon not one, but two familiars at the same time. This was something that was exclusive to the progenitor of the Familia Mancer class. Even she couldn't determine whether this was a good or bad thing. She only hoped that when these two familiars reached their full potential, they would not use their powers to bring the world to ruin. Chapter 660, Angels and Devils Part 1. The two familiars grinned at William. One an angel, the other, a devil. The angel familiar had short blonde hair and green eyes. The devil familiar, on the other hand, had short black hair, and green eyes. They looked exactly like William, just like how Chloe and Claire looked exactly like Celeste. Of course, there were minor differences such as hairstyles, but their identical eye colors, and faces couldn't be denied. "Allow me to introduce myself," the angel said with an angelic smile. "My name is O. I forgot. I still don't have a name." The angel pressed its palm on its forehead and looked at the heavens. "To think that someone as handsome and dashing as me has no name, this is the greatest sin that can be committed in this world," the angel said with such elegance, charisma, and exaggeration that William's liver was starting to itch. Yep, the familiar did indeed belong to him. "My dear comrade," the devil landed on William's shoulder and crossed his arms over his chest. "Come up with a good name for us. I want something that is domineering." The corner of William's lips twitched as he looked at the smug-faced devil on his shoulder. Clearly, he didn't expect his familiars to be this shameless. "A name," William thought as he looked at the angel who had started flirting with his sixth master, Chloe. "You are the most beautiful familiar that I have seen in my lifetime," the angel said as he kissed the back of Chloe's hand. "May I know your name, Miss Beautiful?" Chloe didn't know how to react because this was the first time that someone called her beautiful. Also, the familiar's angelic smile made Celeste's familiar, who liked to beat people into a pulp, blush until her entire face turned beet red. "Am I really beautiful?" Chloe stuttered. The angel held Chloe's hand firmly, and placed it on his chest. "Truly beautiful. You look like the sun that shines brightly in the sky, the stars that guide people during the night, and the moon that watches over the lonely people in the world. In fact, I think the word beautiful is made so that the mortals of this world would have a means to describe your amazing grace." William and the devil clicked their tongues at the same time. Not only that, they also voiced their thoughts out loud at the same time. What a player! The perfect synchronicity made Chiffon, who was standing beside William, giggle. Clearly, she found William's two familiars quite interesting. While the angel was busy flirting with Chloe, her twin, Claire was looking at the devil who was currently seated on William's shoulder. The devil noticed her gaze and felt unnerved. He then flew behind William's head and peeked at the green-haired familiar. Right now, Claire was looking at the devil as if she wanted to dissect him and see what makes him tick. William didn't notice these changes because he was busy thinking of names for these two familiars. "Okay, both of you come here," William ordered. The angel winked at Chloe one last time before flying towards William. The devil that was hiding behind his head flew in front of him, and hovered beside the angel who was its twin. William gazed at the angel who was giving him a confident look. For some reason, William could tell that this familiar of his would bring him a lot of trouble in the future. "Your name will be Elliot," William said to the angel. The angel crossed his arms over his chest and closed his eyes. It was as if he was pondering whether the name given to him matched his angelic image. "You chose a suitable name for me," Elliot gave Williams a thumbs up. "I like." Ding! You bestowed a name on your familiar. Familiar information now loading. Immediately several rows of words appeared on William's status page. Name, Elliot. Race, familiar. Health points, 200/200. Mana, 1500/1500. Strength, 10. Agility, 10. Vitality, 10. Intelligence, 50. Dexterity, 10. Skills. Lightning Bolt, Overflowing charisma, passive. Poker face, passive. Titles: Lightning Adept, Natural Playboy, Wingman. Lightning Bolt. Fires bolts of lightning from your fingertips. Damage dealt is equivalent to Intelligence x2. Has a small chance to stun and paralyze enemies. Overflowing charisma. Has a very high charisma and allows the familiar to get along with everyone. Poker face. Able to hide the familiar's true feelings with an angelic smile. Lightning Adept. The familiar is able to use the power of lightning to smite his enemies. All lightning attacks deal 20% more damage. Naturally Playboy. With good looks and overflowing charisma, the familiar has a very high percentage in getting along with the ladies. Has a moderate chance that the familiar will be able to get under their skirts as well. Wingman. When partnered with another familiar, all stats and the effects of abilities increases by 50%. William massaged his temple because his worries had finally come to life. In the beginning he was only thinking that it was a coincidence, but after seeing Elliot's stats, he now fully understood that this familiar was definitely a skirt chaser. God damn it! William cursed silently. You better behave yourself and not get yourself into trouble. It was at that moment when Elliot chuckled and smirked at him. Don't worry, Will. I will use protection, Elliot replied through telepathy. You can count on me. Williams almost choked on his saliva because he didn't expect that Elliot was able to read his thoughts. Before he could give a reply, another person joined their conversation. Hello, mic test, the devil familiar said. How about me? What about my name? William gave Elliot the you and I will need to have a long talk later before shifting his attention to the devil familiar who was looking back at him with great expectations. Clearly, it was also very excited to receive its name from William. Your name will be Conan, William answered. The name means little wolf. Little wolf. The devil rubbed its chin before nodding its head. I like this name. Very well, from now on, I am Conan. Ding. You bestowed a name on your familiar. Familiar information now loading. William received another batch of notifications, which held Conan's information. Name, Conan. Race, familiar. Health points, 2500/2500. Mana, 300/300. Strength, 10. Agility, 10. Vitality, 50. Intelligence, 10. Dexterity, 10. Ability. Iron Wall. Rotating Elemental Shields. Title: Fortress Disciple. Calculus. Wingman. Iron Wall. Summons an iron wall to serve as a defensive structure. The iron wall will be able to absorb damage equivalent to the familiar's maximum health points. The higher the familiar's health, the more durable the wall is. The iron wall will break once the damage surpasses its limit. Rotating Elemental Shields. Creates 3 shields that revolve around the target. The rotating elemental shields will be able to absorb damage equivalent to the familiar's maximum health points. The higher the familiar's health, the more damage the shields can absorb. The rotating elemental shields will break once the damage surpasses its limit. Fortress Disciple. Increase all defensive abilities by 20%. Calculus. Very good in calculation. This ability also works during battle. Wingman. When partnered with another familiar, all stats and the effects of abilities increases by 50%. William sighed in relief because Conan's information wasn't as exaggerated as Elliot's. After looking at his information, the half-elf realized that the two familiars complemented each other really well. One was made for offense, the other for defense. Right now, the two familiars were very weak because William still hadn't upgraded their abilities using the skills of the Familia Mancer. Just as he was about to check his new prestige class, another set of notifications appeared on his status page. Ding! Congratulations! Unique prestige class, Familia Mancer has now been unlocked. Familia Mancer. Life is too short to be living somebody else's dream. The Familia Mancer job class is a new profession that was recently born in the world of Hestia. Few know its true powers, and the changes it will bring to the world. You have learned the skill Summon Familiar. You have learned the skill Familiar Side View. You have learned the skill Familiar Smite. You have learned the skill Dance of the Fireflies. You have learned the skill Battle Tactics X. You have learned the skill Detect Invisibility X. You have learned the skill Spell Resistance X. You have learned the skill Soul Fusion. You have learned the skill Tactician. You have acquired the title Teamwork is Dream Work. Ding! Congratulations! Host's second subclass has successfully been unlocked. Familia Mancer is permanently locked on the second subclass. No other job classes may be equipped in the slot of the second subclass. William's eyes widened in shock because of the last message that he saw on his status page. Originally, he had one main class, and one subclass. Having these two options already gave him plenty of flexibility. Now that a second subclass had been unlocked, it gave William a new set of powers that he could use, without the need to switch the Familia Mancer job class with other professions.